In the center of the capital, the news spread like wildfire. On the evening of a tense press conference, Valerie Hargrave, a government official known for her strong stance against protests, appeared on live television. She sat at a large table, surrounded by reporters and cameras, her face serious and determined. The air was thick with anticipation as everyone waited for her to speak. "Today," she began, her voice clear and controlled, "I am announcing the suspension of Malik Traoré, a known supporter of the illegal protest movement that has been disrupting peace in this city. His actions and the actions of those who follow him threaten the safety and stability of our nation." As the words left her mouth, a wave of shock washed over the crowd. Malik, a young man known for his passionate speeches and relentless support for the rights of the people, was suddenly branded a danger to society. The protest movement that had been growing for months, calling for government reforms and more rights for the oppressed, was now being targeted by the very people they had hoped would listen. Valerie continued, detailing accusations against Malik. She said he had been at the heart of violent clashes during recent protests, and that he had encouraged others to take part in unlawful activities. "We cannot stand by while people like Malik threaten the peace we have fought so hard to build," she declared. News channels quickly picked up the story, and within hours, it was trending across social media. Supporters of Malik were outraged, some immediately taking to the streets to express their anger. The protest movement, once just a group of passionate individuals, now had a new symbol: Malik, who had become both a hero and a target. But as the day wore on, doubts began to emerge. Not everyone believed the government's version of events. People who had seen Malik speak at previous rallies insisted that he was peaceful, focused on change through discussion, not violence. They wondered if the government was using Malik as a scapegoat to weaken the growing protest movement. In the midst of all this confusion, Malik himself remained silent. He was shocked, not just by the accusations, but by the sudden public outcry. He never imagined that his actions, which he believed were for the good of the people, could be twisted into something dangerous. At his small apartment, surrounded by close friends and family, Malik tried to make sense of what was happening. His mind raced. He knew he had to do something to clear his name, but he didn't know where to start. Meanwhile, across town, the atmosphere was thick with tension. As Valerie Hargrave's words echoed in the ears of the public, she sat back in her office, confident that her actions were justified. She believed she was protecting the peace and stability of the nation. In her mind, the protest movement was a threat, and the people who followed Malik were no different from criminals who needed to be stopped. As the evening turned to night, the streets were filled with people holding signs, chanting for justice. They marched in the name of Malik, in the name of freedom. In the government offices, however, things were quieter, but the quiet was just the calm before the storm. No one knew it yet, but the story was about to take a sharp turn. Behind the scenes, Malik's family had already begun making calls. They needed help. They needed someone who could see through the government's lies and stand up for what was right. What they didn't know was that the person they were looking for was about to walk into their lives. The news of Malik Traoré's suspension spread quickly, stirring strong emotions across the city. Some people felt betrayed, others angry. But for Malik, it was like waking up to a nightmare. He had spent so much time fighting for what he believed was right, and now, the government was calling him a criminal. His heart sank as he watched the television. The same screen where Valerie Hargrave had made her announcement. It was hard to believe that the woman in power could accuse him of being a threat to peace when all he had ever wanted was justice. The protests against the government grew louder that night. People filled the streets, marching with signs that read "Free Malik" and "We stand with the truth." Some of them shouted his name, while others waved flags that symbolized the movement he had helped lead. These were not just random citizens. They were his supporters, his friends, his fellow activists, all standing together in defiance of the government's decision. However, not everyone was on Malik's side. The media, quick to pick up on the official story, painted him as a dangerous figure. The reporters on television spoke of him as if he were a criminal, one whose actions endangered the safety of innocent people. These stories, filled with half-truths and twisted facts, began to shape the public's view of Malik. The longer this narrative spread, the harder it became for anyone to see him as the peaceful activist he once was. The government's power over public opinion was growing stronger. Malik sat in his apartment that night, his mind racing. He couldn't understand how everything had turned against him so quickly. Had his words at the protests really been that dangerous? Had his call for change somehow led to violence? His phone buzzed with messages from his supporters, many of whom were asking the same question. What now? His closest friends told him to stay calm, but he could feel the weight of the world pressing down on him. Every time he tried to speak out in his own defense, he found himself drowned out by the noise of accusations and hate. In the face of all this, he realized that he needed help. He couldn't clear his name alone, not against such a powerful force. He needed someone who could navigate the legal system, someone who understood how to fight back with the truth. Meanwhile, Valerie Hargrave watched the events unfold with a cold, calculating expression. Her plan to suspend Malik had worked better than she had expected. The protests, while loud, seemed to be falling apart. People were confused, uncertain about what to believe. Many of Malik's supporters began questioning whether they had been following the wrong leader. Some even turned against him, worried about the consequences of standing by someone accused of endangering the peace. The government's grip on the city tightened as they seized this opportunity to paint Malik as a radical, while simultaneously offering to restore order and prevent further chaos. In the midst of all the confusion, Malik's family started reaching out to people who might help. They had heard of Nina Davis, a lawyer with a reputation for standing up to powerful forces. She was known for taking on cases that others wouldn't touch. Malik's family, desperate to find someone who would believe in him, called her office. They left messages, hoping she would listen. Back at Malik's apartment, he sat in the dim light, staring at his phone, when a message finally came through. It was a short note from Nina Davis. "I will meet with you tomorrow. We'll figure this out." Malik felt a small spark of hope, something he hadn't felt since the suspension. Maybe, just maybe, there was a way out of this. But even as hope began to grow, the situation was far from over. The battle was just beginning, and Malik had no idea how much bigger it would get. He didn't know that the truth, once uncovered, would shake everything to its core. The next morning, Malik sat anxiously in his apartment, nervously tapping his fingers on the table. It had been a long night of thinking about everything that had happened, and now, the only thing that seemed to offer him any chance of clearing his name was Nina Davis. He had heard of her before. A lawyer known for standing up against powerful people and big institutions. She was known for taking on cases that others would shy away from, and for winning against the odds. Malik wasn't sure what to expect when she walked through his door, but he was willing to hope. Hope was all he had left. The knock at the door startled him, and his heart skipped a beat. He opened it to find a woman in her late 30s, dressed in a smart professional suit. She had short, dark hair and sharp, confident eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. She smiled at him, though there was no warmth in it, just the kind of professionalism that let you know she meant business. "Mr. Traoré?" she asked, extending a hand. "I'm Nina Davis. We spoke on the phone." Malik shook her hand, feeling the firmness of her grip. "Yes, thank you for coming. I didn't know who else to turn to," he said, his voice shaking slightly. Nina nodded and stepped inside, taking a seat at the small dining table where Malik had been sitting earlier. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. "Let's get straight to it," she said. "I've read through the reports about your suspension and the protests. I'm not here to judge you, Malik. I'm here to find out what really happened and help you fight back." Malik felt a weight lift off his chest. She wasn't here to lecture him or tell him he was wrong. She was here to help him find the truth. "I don't understand how this happened," Malik said, sitting across from her. "I've been a part of protests for months, yes. But we've always been peaceful. We're fighting for change, not violence. Now they're calling me a threat." "It's a common tactic," Nina replied, her voice steady. "Governments and officials like Hargrave want to control the message. If they can paint you as dangerous, they can justify their actions. It's easier to shut down a movement if they can say it's a threat to society. But we're not going to let that happen." Nina opened her briefcase and pulled out a stack of papers. "I need to see everything," she said. "Anything you have, any evidence, any witness statements, everything. We're going to need to dismantle their case piece by piece." Malik nodded and handed over everything he had. It wasn't much. Just a few protest flyers, some photographs, and messages from his supporters. It felt like nothing compared to the power and resources the government had. Nina looked through the materials carefully, her brow furrowed in concentration. "This isn't as clear-cut as they want it to be," she said after a few moments. "The government's case is based on accusations, but there are holes in their story. Someone is trying to make you the scapegoat for something much bigger. We need to find out who." Malik's heart raced. "You think it's a setup?" "I'm not sure yet," Nina said, placing the papers back in her briefcase. "But there's definitely more going on here than you realize. We need to dig deeper." She stood up, her eyes sharp and focused. "This isn't going to be easy, but we'll figure it out. You've got people on your side, and now you've got me." For the first time since the suspension, Malik felt a sense of hope stirring inside him. Nina was more than just a lawyer. She was determined, and she had the kind of confidence he needed to believe that this fight was winnable. As she left his apartment, she gave him a brief nod. "Don't worry, Malik. We're going to uncover the truth." And with that, Malik knew that the fight was just beginning. The truth was out there, and Nina was the key to finding it. Nina Davis spent the next few days diving into Malik's case with everything she had. She was meticulous, going through every detail of the protest footage, analyzing the government statements, and speaking to anyone who might know something about the situation. She was determined to get to the bottom of this, but the more she dug, the more she realized something wasn't adding up. One of the first things Nina discovered was that the key eyewitness who had identified Malik as being at the center of the violence had given conflicting statements. At first, the person had claimed to have seen Malik incite the chaos in the streets, but when Nina looked at the original police report, there were no details about this so-called witness, only a vague description. It seemed odd to her. Eyewitness accounts were usually more specific, especially when it came to identifying someone as important as Malik. Nina decided to track down this witness. After a few phone calls and a bit of digging, she found him, a man named Robert Allen. He was a street vendor who had been nearby when the protest turned violent. Nina arranged to meet him at a small cafe on the outskirts of the city, hoping he might offer some new information. When Robert arrived, he seemed nervous. His eyes darted around, and he didn't make eye contact with Nina right away. "Are you sure about this?" he asked in a hushed voice. "I don't want any trouble." Nina sat down across from him, her voice calm and reassuring. "I just want to know the truth, Robert. That's all. If Malik didn't do what they say he did, we need to make that clear." Robert hesitated for a moment before speaking. "I didn't actually see him," he admitted, looking down at the table. "They made me say it. The cops, I mean. They told me if I didn't say I saw Malik, I'd be in trouble. They said I had to help them get him." Nina's mind raced as she listened. This was it. The first real crack in the government's story. Robert hadn't seen Malik at all. He'd been forced to lie. Nina pressed him for more details, and he reluctantly explained how the police had pressured him, threatening to arrest him if he didn't cooperate. It was clear now that Malik had been framed. With this new information, Nina felt a surge of hope. This wasn't just a simple misunderstanding or a series of coincidences. Someone had been working to make Malik look guilty, and they had used lies and threats to do it. Nina's instincts told her this was bigger than just a bad accusation. There were powerful people involved, and they weren't going to give up without a fight. Nina returned to Malik's apartment, eager to share the news. When she told him what she had learned, he felt a mix of relief and anger. "So it's all been a lie? They've been lying about me this whole time?" "Yes," Nina confirmed, her voice firm. "But we have to be careful. This is just the beginning. We need more evidence to expose the people behind it all. We need to figure out who was pulling the strings." Malik nodded, his mind working to process everything. He had always known there was something off about the accusations, but hearing it from Nina made it feel real. It wasn't just about him anymore. This was about the entire movement and the people who had been silenced by the government's lies. "What do we do next?" Malik asked, his voice determined. "We find the people responsible," Nina replied, her eyes narrowing, "and we make them pay for what they've done. But we have to move fast. The longer we wait, the more chances they have to cover their tracks." As Nina left the apartment, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the edge of something much bigger than just a legal case. Someone, somewhere, was pulling the strings. And Nina was going to make sure that, in the end, the truth would come out. After Nina Davis uncovered the truth about the false eyewitness, she knew that this case was far from over. Malik had been wrongfully accused, but the forces behind the accusations were powerful and willing to do anything to protect their secrets. Nina wasn't just fighting to clear Malik's name anymore. She was fighting to expose corruption at the highest levels. The government wasn't going to give up without a fight, and neither would she. Nina spent the next several days planning her strategy carefully. The first thing she needed to do was build a solid defense for Malik, one that could not be easily torn apart. She knew the stakes were high, and any mistake could make everything worse. She started by gathering more evidence, going through police records, protest footage, and even interviewing witnesses who were at the protests. Nina was focused on finding more pieces of the puzzle that would prove the government's story was a lie. One of the key pieces of the case was the question of who had been pulling the strings behind the false accusations. Nina suspected that Valerie Hargrave, the government official who had orchestrated Malik's suspension, was more involved than anyone realized. She couldn't be sure yet, but Nina's gut told her that Hargrave had a hand in manipulating the narrative, making sure that Malik was blamed for something he hadn't done. Nina decided to look into Hargrave's background to find any connections that might reveal her true motives. As she dug deeper into Hargrave's past, Nina uncovered a troubling link between her and a private security company that had been hired to monitor protest groups. The company had been involved in several controversial incidents, including the suppression of protests in other cities. It didn't take long for Nina to make the connection. Hargrave had been using the security company to target activists like Malik. The more Nina uncovered, the clearer it became that Malik was just a pawn in a much larger game. With this new information, Nina began to form a plan. Her strategy wasn't just about proving Malik's innocence. It was about exposing the web of corruption that had been hiding in plain sight. She knew that if she could bring the truth to light, it could change everything. But she also knew that doing so would put her and Malik in serious danger. The people behind the lies would stop at nothing to protect their power, and Nina would have to be careful in how she played her next moves. Nina started preparing her defense. She would need expert witnesses to testify on Malik's behalf, people who could speak to his character and his role in the protest movement. She also began assembling a team of investigators to dig deeper into the security company's activities, hoping to uncover even more evidence of wrongdoing. The more she could tie Hargrave and others to the illegal actions, the stronger her case would be. At the same time, Nina worked to maintain a low profile. She knew the government was watching closely, waiting for any mistake she might make. She kept her communications secure, meeting with her team in private and avoiding any unnecessary attention. Everything depended on staying one step ahead. Malik, meanwhile, was trying to stay focused, but it was hard. The weight of the situation hung heavy on his shoulders. Every day that passed felt like a battle, and the longer this dragged on, the more he feared that he would lose everything he had fought for. Still, he trusted Nina. She was his best chance at justice. As the days turned into weeks, Nina felt the pressure mounting. She had a solid plan, but there was still so much left to do. The road ahead was full of obstacles, and it was clear that there would be many more challenges to face. But Nina wasn't one to back down. She was determined to expose the truth, no matter what it took. With each step, Nina knew they were getting closer to the heart of the conspiracy. It was only a matter of time before the people behind the lies would be exposed. And when that moment came, Nina would make sure that Malik's name was cleared and that the truth could no longer be hidden. Nina Davis had spent weeks preparing her defense for Malik, and she was finally ready to make her move. She knew the stakes were high. If she played her cards right, she could expose the corruption that had targeted Malik. But the people behind the lies were powerful, and they wouldn't let their secrets slip easily. Nina had to be careful. Every decision mattered now. With her team in place, Nina decided it was time to confront the government. She requested a meeting with Valerie Hargrave, the official who had first accused Malik of inciting violence at the protests. Nina knew that Hargrave was one of the key figures behind the false accusations, and she hoped to get her to crack under pressure. If she could push the right buttons, Nina might be able to force Hargrave into admitting her role in the scheme. The meeting was set for the following week. Nina spent the days leading up to it, reviewing everything she had gathered. The evidence, the witness statements, the connections between Hargrave and the private security company. It was all there. Nina was confident, but she also knew that Hargrave was not someone who would easily admit to wrongdoing. On the day of the meeting, Nina arrived at the government office building, her nerves steady but her mind focused. She had one shot at this. As she walked through the hallways, she could feel the eyes of the other officials on her, but she kept her head high. She had nothing to hide. Hargrave was the one who had built this web of lies, and Nina was determined to expose it. When Nina entered the meeting room, Valerie Hargrave was already sitting at the large table, her expression cold and calculating. She greeted Nina with a tight smile, but it was clear she wasn't expecting a friendly conversation. "Miss Davis," Hargrave said, her tone polite but guarded, "what can I do for you today?" Nina wasted no time. "I'm here because of Malik Traoré. I'm here to discuss the accusations against him." Hargrave's eyes narrowed slightly. "You've been spending a lot of time on this case. Are you sure you're not getting too involved?" Nina didn't flinch. "I'm involved because it's my job to uncover the truth. And the truth is, Malik was framed. You and your colleagues have been lying to the public to cover up the real story." Hargrave's smile faded. "You're mistaken, Miss Davis. Malik is responsible for the violence at those protests. We've been following the law, doing what's necessary to protect the peace." "Don't lie," Nina said, her voice steady. "You and the private security company have been manipulating the story from the start. You used witnesses who were forced to lie, and you twisted the facts to make Malik the scapegoat. I have the evidence to prove it." Hargrave shifted in her seat, clearly uncomfortable. "You're accusing me of something very serious, Nina. Are you sure you want to go down this path?" Nina leaned forward, her gaze unwavering. "I'm sure, and I'm not the only one who knows the truth now. We've already spoken to the witnesses. We've uncovered the connection between your office and the security company. The walls are closing in, Valerie. You can either come clean now or face the consequences later." The room was silent for a moment. Hargrave seemed to weigh her options, her mind racing. Nina knew she had her. Hargrave was trapped in her own lies, and now it was just a matter of whether she would admit it or try to cover it up. "This isn't going to end well for you," Hargrave finally said, her voice low and dangerous. "You think you can take me down? There's too much at stake here." Nina stood up, her expression calm but firm. "I'm not afraid of you, Valerie. I'm fighting for what's right, and I won't stop until the truth is exposed. The people deserve to know what you've done." Hargrave stood up as well, her face flushed with anger. "We'll see about that, Miss Davis." With that, Nina left the meeting room, feeling the weight of the confrontation settle in her chest. She knew the battle was far from over. Hargrave wasn't going to give up easily, and there would be more challenges ahead. But Nina had made her point. The truth was out there, and she was going to make sure it came to light, no matter what it took. After the tense meeting with Valerie Hargrave, Nina Davis knew the situation had changed. Hargrave was not someone who would easily give in, and now it was clear that the stakes were even higher than Nina had originally thought. The government official had threatened her directly, but Nina wasn't backing down. She couldn't. Too many lives were on the line, including Malik's. The days following the meeting were filled with anxiety. Nina couldn't shake the feeling that Hargrave and her allies would try to stop her, to shut her down before she could expose the full truth. But Nina wasn't alone in this fight. She had a team behind her, a small but determined group of people who believed in what she was doing. Together, they would push forward, no matter the cost. Nina spent the next few days focusing on gathering even more evidence. She knew that the more solid proof she could collect, the harder it would be for the government to deny the truth. She interviewed more witnesses, including some who had been too afraid to come forward before. Some spoke about their experiences at the protest, while others shared their knowledge of the private security company and its involvement in monitoring activist groups. The more pieces of the puzzle Nina put together, the clearer it became that Malik had been framed from the beginning. One breakthrough came when Nina was able to track down a former employee of the security company. The man, named Thomas, had quit his job after growing uncomfortable with some of the company's actions. He had first-hand knowledge of how they had been instructed to target certain individuals and manipulate evidence to support false claims. Nina arranged a meeting with him in a quiet cafe on the outskirts of the city. When Thomas spoke, his voice was shaky, but there was no doubt in his words. "They told me to keep an eye on Malik," he explained. "They said he was a troublemaker, that he was inciting violence. But it was all a lie. He wasn't doing anything wrong. They just wanted to make an example out of him. They thought if they could make him the face of the protests, it would scare other people into backing down." Nina felt a rush of hope. Thomas' testimony was exactly what she needed to turn the case around. He had been there, and he could confirm everything she had suspected. This was the smoking gun that would link Hargrave and the security company to the false accusations. Armed with this new evidence, Nina returned to Malik's apartment and shared the news with him. "We've got them," Nina said, a glimmer of determination in her eyes. "Thomas is going to testify. He'll confirm everything about the security company's involvement in framing you." Malik listened, his heart racing. "You really think this will work?" "I do," Nina replied. "We have the truth on our side now. It's just a matter of making sure it all comes to light." Malik nodded, but the weight of the situation was still heavy on his shoulders. He had always known that he was being targeted, but hearing Nina's plan laid out so clearly made it feel real. This wasn't just about clearing his name anymore. It was about exposing the corruption and the people who thought they could get away with manipulating the system. As the days passed, Nina and her team worked tirelessly to prepare for the next step. They filed a petition to bring the evidence into court, hoping to force an official investigation into the security company's actions. Nina knew that once they presented Thomas' testimony, there would be no going back. The truth would have to be acknowledged. But even as the wheels of justice began to turn, Nina couldn't shake the feeling that Hargrave and her allies were already planning their next move. She knew they wouldn't just sit back and let this happen. They would fight back, and the battle was far from over. Nina was ready for it, though. She had come too far to stop now. With the evidence in place, Nina was determined to see this through to the end. Malik's name would be cleared, and the truth would be exposed, no matter how hard the fight became. The turning point had arrived, and now it was only a matter of time before everything fell into place. The day of the hearing had finally arrived. Nina Davis felt a mix of nerves and determination as she stood in the courtroom. This was it, the moment she had worked for, the moment that could change everything. Malik's future depended on what happened in the next few hours, and just as importantly, the truth about the government's lies and manipulation was about to come to light. Nina glanced at Malik, sitting beside her, his face tense but resolute. She knew how much this meant to him. It wasn't just about clearing his name anymore. It was about standing up to the system that had tried to crush him, about proving that one person could make a difference. The courtroom buzzed with quiet conversations as everyone took their seats. Nina had done everything she could to prepare, gathering all the evidence she needed to make a solid case. Thomas, the former security company employee, was set to testify. His statement would be the key to exposing the web of lies surrounding Malik's accusation. When the judge entered the room, everyone fell silent. The proceedings began, and Nina could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her. She took a deep breath and focused on the task ahead. The first part of the hearing was just a formality, but once it was her turn to speak, she would make sure the truth came out. As the defense attorneys for the government began their arguments, Nina felt a sense of urgency. They were trying to downplay the evidence, dismissing the witness testimonies, and pushing for a quick decision. It was clear they were worried. Nina's team had gathered too much evidence, and the truth was becoming harder and harder to hide. Finally, the moment came. Nina stood up and walked confidently to the front of the room. She addressed the judge and the courtroom with a steady voice, presenting the evidence she had worked so hard to collect. She showed the footage, the witness statements, and Thomas' testimony. Each piece of evidence proved that Malik had been framed, that the government and the security company had conspired to make him the scapegoat for something he hadn't done. The defense team tried to push back, but Nina's case was airtight. As Thomas took the stand and confirmed everything Nina had uncovered, it was clear that there was no way to deny the truth. The defense attorneys could only watch as their case unraveled. "I didn't want to be part of it," Thomas explained, his voice shaking but clear. I was just following orders, but I couldn't keep lying. I knew what they were doing wasn't right. With each word, Nana felt a sense of victory building inside her. This was what they had been fighting for, the chance to make things right. The judge listened carefully to every word, and after what felt like hours, the decision was finally made. Based on the evidence presented, the judge said, the court finds the charges against Malik Traoré to be false. The accusations were fabricated, and the individuals responsible for these actions will be investigated further. Nina let out a breath she didn't realize she had been holding. Malik's name had been cleared. The truth had won. The courtroom was silent for a moment, but then the quiet tension broke. Malik stood up, his face a mix of relief and disbelief. For the first time in a long while, he felt like he could breathe again. Nina turned to him, offering a small smile. "You did it," she said softly. "We did it," Malik replied, his voice thick with emotion. Outside the courthouse, the news spread quickly. The truth about the false accusations, the government's manipulation, and the security company's involvement became the talk of the town. Nina knew this wasn't just a victory for Malik. It was a victory for everyone who had ever been wronged by the system. It was proof that one person, no matter how small their voice seemed, could make a difference. As Malik and Nana walked away from the courthouse, they knew the battle wasn't over. There were still people who needed to be held accountable, still more work to be done to fix the system. But for now, they could finally celebrate the truth, and for the first time in a long while, Malik felt free.